You know that feeling? That deep simmering burn in your stomach, the one that whispers, "This is fundamentally wrong. This is unjust." For 10 years, that fire was my fuel. It was the only thing keeping me warm in the cold, cavernous space I used to clean. My name is Nina. I'm 31 now, and this is the story of how a 20-year-old girl, scrubbing someone else's shame off their marble floors, became the woman who signed the eviction notice for the very family who broke her. They called me disposable. They treated me like a ghost. They didn't know I was simply collecting the receipts. When I walked out of that house a decade ago, I made a promise to myself. Not a loud, angry shout, but a quiet, rock-solid vow. And on a frigid Tuesday morning, holding a manila folder filled with code violations and legal paperwork, I walked back in. They didn't recognize me in the sharp blazer, but they certainly recognized the address on the clipboard. The smile that froze on Mrs. Langford's face, it was quite possibly the most satisfying thing I have ever witnessed. Hello, everyone. If you've ever been told you're not good enough, if you've ever had a powerful person treat you like you're less than the dust under their shoes, then this story is for you. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe, just maybe, let this be the fuel for your own comeback. I'm Nina, and I work as a certified property manager for the city's luxury estates division. That job title is everything to me. It represents the decade I spent building myself brick by agonizing brick out of the hole the Langford family tried to bury me in. Today, I want to share the story of the Greystone Mansion. This isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming my dignity. It's about the devastating psychological toll of being perpetually disrespected and the sweet, almost spiritual release of finally serving justice. This is my real-life story, and it's time to tell it. So, let's begin. I started working for the Langfords when I was 19. I desperately needed the money for college tuition, and the advertised pay on paper was fantastic. Greystone Mansion was a monstrosity of old money arrogance. Dark stone, thick pillars, and a 3-story foyer with a marble floor that reflected the vaulted ceiling like a black mirror. It didn't smell like a home. It smelled of old leather, expensive dust, and the vague metallic scent of money that hadn't been earned recently. The Langfords were Mr. Silas Langford, who owned a mid-tier finance firm, and Mrs. Eleanor Langford, a socialite whose only job seemed to be judging everyone beneath her. Then there was their son, Julian, a perpetual college student who treated the house staff like background noise, literally stepping over you if you were in his way. The injustice started small, a slow, toxic drip that eroded my self-worth. It was the little things that ate away at your soul. Mrs. Langford would follow me with a pristine white glove, running it over surfaces I'd just cleaned. If she found a microscopic speck of dust, and she always found one, she wouldn't just tell me. She would stage it. She'd hold the glove out, staring not at the dust, but directly at me, her eyes cold and dismissive. "Nina, dear, you must remember, this isn't some tenement you're cleaning. This is Greystone. We pay you a great deal of money to understand the difference between clean and Langford clean." That word, tenement, it was meant to sting. It was meant to remind me of the small, cramped, worn-out apartment I lived in. It was a verbal weapon, perfectly aimed. My days were a cycle of physical pain and emotional exhaustion. My back constantly ached from scrubbing those massive marble floors. floors that truly never felt clean enough. I remember one day, I was polishing a small antique table in the drawing room. I had spent 20 minutes on it. Mrs. Langford swept in, ran her finger across it, and tutted. "You've missed the inner leg carving, Nina. That's 100-year-old piece. That lack of attention to detail is why you'll always be here." She gestured around the room, making me feel like the room itself was a cage. Then came the pay docking. She'd find imagined mistakes and subtract the penalty from my weekly envelope. £10 for leaving a window open. £25 for using the wrong type of polish on an antique. I was making less and less, yet working longer and longer. By the time I was 20, I was perpetually operating at a deficit, both financially and emotionally. I felt my dignity being chipped away with every lost pound. The worst was the sheer invisibility. I'd be on my hands and knees scrubbing a stain out of the carpet, and Julian would walk directly over me, talking loudly on his phone, not even breaking his stride. Once I reached out my hand to brace myself, and he kicked it, not maliciously but unthinkingly, as if he'd simply stumbled over a misplaced ottoman. When I cried out, he just glanced down, mildly annoyed, and kept walking. That kind of disrespect, the casual, thoughtless cruelty, it doesn't just make you angry. It makes you feel powerless. It makes you question if you deserve any better. It breeds a corrosive resentment that begins to eat away at your faith in fairness. The conflict came to a head in the winter of my 20th year. I was running on fumes, working double shifts to save for my second-year tuition. One afternoon, I was carrying a heavy load of the Langfords' expensive dry cleaning. Silas's bespoke suits, Eleanor's silk evening gowns, down the grand main staircase. The landing rug, I remember, was bunched up. I'd told Mrs. Langford about it for weeks, worried someone would trip, but of course it was never a priority. I caught my heel on that bunched rug. The bags went flying. Dozens of perfectly pressed, pristine garments, clothing that cost more than my entire year's salary, all landed in a heap on the marble, right into a puddle of stagnant water from a leaky, unmaintained pipe I'd also reported weeks ago. I froze. My heart hammered so hard I thought it would break a rib. The sound of the clothes hitting the water was sickening. I scrambled, trying to salvage the ruined silk and wool, my hands shaking uncontrollably, already tasting the failure. Mrs. Langford walked into the foyer then. She didn't look concerned. She didn't even look angry. She looked satisfied, like she'd finally caught me in a blunder worthy of her total contempt. "Look at this, Silas. Just look at the sheer incompetence." Her voice was high-pitched, cutting. Mr. Langford came rushing in, his face turning purple. "Eleanor, what is it?" "Oh, my God, Nina. Are those the new bespoke suits?" I felt the burning humiliation spread from my chest up to my face. "Miss Langford, I am so sorry. The rug. I told you about the rug. I'll pay for the cleaning, I promise. I'll work for free this month." I was pleading, bargaining for my dignity. Mrs. Langford walked closer, her expensive shoes clicking sharply on the clean marble I'd scrubbed with my own hands that morning. "Pay for the cleaning? Nina, you couldn't pay for the buttons on these suits with a year of your salary. You are a disaster. You are unreliable. You are unclean." She used that word again, letting it hang in the air, connecting my worth to my lack of wealth. Mr. Langford was less theatrical, more final. "Get up, Nina. We're done here. Don't come back. You'll be sent the paltry amount we owe you. minus the damages, of course. But my last week's pay, my tuition money. The tears were streaming down my face now, but I remember gripping my hands into fists, trying to hold on to one thread of dignity. Mrs. Langford gave me that cold, thin smile one last time. Consider it your final lesson, Nina. Some people are simply not cut out for this world. Now, get your things and get out of my house. I walked out of Greystone Mansion that morning with nothing but the clothes on my back, a fired employee, and a deep, soul-crushing sense of failure. The loss of the job was secondary. What truly devastated me was the way they had dismissed my entire existence as worthless. They had stolen my future by taking my tuition savings, and then insulted my past by calling me unclean. The bus ride home was a blur of shaking and dry, desperate sobs. I felt hollowed out. I went straight to my small, dark room and sat on the floor, surrounded by my college textbooks. I looked at the history book, the calculus book, and realized they were right. As long as I was Nina the maid, my future was entirely dependent on the whims of people like the Langfords. It was my breaking point. But in that break, something forged. I didn't seek pity. I sought power. Not the cruel, arbitrary power the Langfords wielded, but the quiet, undeniable power of knowledge and certification. I realized they thought their money made them invincible. But money doesn't buy compliance. It doesn't buy proper zoning. It doesn't buy up-to-code wiring. That night, I made the vow. I wouldn't just be successful. I would become relevant to them. I wouldn't make $1 million and wave it in their face. I would acquire the specific legal authority to make their life complicated. I would master the very rulebook they believed they were exempt from. I switched my college major. Out went the vague idea of an arts degree. In came urban planning, zoning law, and property management certification. For the next 10 years, I lived and breathed it. I worked 3 jobs, waiting tables, tutoring, and cleaning offices where no one knew my name or judged my effort. I studied under harsh fluorescent lights until 2 a.m. Every zoning map, every fire code manual, every building regulation felt like a weapon I was forging for a future war. The Greystone Mansion address, 417 Willow Creek Lane, became my mantra, a tiny burning coal in my stomach, reminding me why I couldn't stop, why I couldn't rest. The years passed. I finished college with honors, secured my professional licensing, and excelled in my field. My focus was absolute. I was headhunted by the city's municipal compliance division, the very office responsible for inspecting high-value historic estates for safety and code adherence. My specialty? Forensic analysis of property records and zoning deviations. Then, one Monday morning, the new roster hit my desk. I scanned the list of properties for my compliance audits, and there it was, just above the list for the local senator's estate. Greystone Estate, 417 Willow Creek Lane. My hands didn't shake, my breathing didn't hitch. I felt a surge of pure, cold focus. It wasn't hatred, it was surgical intent. This wasn't personal anymore. This was a job I was uniquely qualified to do, and I would do it perfectly. I spent 2 days researching Greystone's municipal records, permits, and historical zoning overlays, and the Langfords, in their arrogance, had left a paper trail wide enough for a truck. They had an unregistered pool house extension, a clear zoning violation. They had an outdated, compromised electrical system that was a serious fire hazard. And most critically, they had a massive, unpermitted alteration to a load-bearing wall to create Eleanor's gallery space. They thought no one would ever check. They thought their status protected them. On Tuesday, I pulled up to Greystone in a city-issued unmarked sedan. I was wearing a sharp, tailored navy blazer, slacks, and a pair of professional heels. My hair was tied back severely. I carried a sturdy clipboard and a city-stamped manila folder. I rang the bell. A new maid, looking young and tired, answered the door. I asked for Mr. and Mrs. Langford. I could see the fatigue in her eyes, the same exhaustion I'd carried a decade earlier. I waited in the grand foyer. It hadn't aged well. The marble I'd killed myself cleaning now had noticeable spiderweb cracks. The air felt stale. The neglect was palpable. They thought their house was a fortress. It was, in fact, a ruin covered by expensive veneers. They walked in together, Mrs. Langford first, wearing a flowing silk house dress, her face already set in a look of mild irritation at the inconvenience. Mr. Langford followed, his tie slightly askew. They looked right at me, and then their smiles froze. Mrs. Langford's eyes darted over my blazer, my clipboard, and back up to my face. The recognition was slow, dawning like a horrifying sunrise. Her jaw slackened. You look familiar. Are you? No, that's impossible. Nina? Her voice was barely a whisper of disbelief. Mr. Langford, always more concerned with appearances, tried to assert control. Eleanor, who is this? I wasn't expecting an inspector. Did you call us, miss? I stood perfectly still, my posture impeccable. I didn't raise my voice. I simply let the authority of my position speak. Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. Langford. I am Nina Hayes. I am here today on behalf of the Municipal Compliance Division. This is an official, scheduled, high-value estate audit. Nina, you're the maid, Mrs. Langford stammered, the words sounding alien in her mouth. I allowed myself a single, small, almost invisible smile. I was. Today, I am the lead inspector assigned to Greystone Estate. The next 2 hours were glorious, torturous theater for them. I was methodical. I was relentless. I pointed out the cracked marble on the main staircase, a safety violation. I pointed out the uninsulated, exposed wiring in the basement, a fire hazard. I pointed out the unpermitted pool house, a zoning violation. I wasn't guessing. I was quoting the city codes verbatim. Mr. Langford was sweating, despite the chill in the air. This is outrageous. This is a witch hunt. These are historic homes. You make allowances. I clicked my pen, the sound sharp and final. Section 4.12, subsection B of the Historical Preservation Overlay states that all structural renovations must be filed with and approved by the Municipal Planning Board. Your gallery space, Mr. Langford, required a seismic and structural reassessment permit you never filed. That is a Category 3 structural violation, meaning the integrity of the property is at risk, period. Mrs. Langford looked truly desperate, her arrogance completely stripped away. Nina, please, we know we were hard on you. We were stressed. We'll give you a bonus. We'll double your old salary. Just make this go away. That was the moment. The full weight of a decade of injustice crashed into the present. She was offering me my old life back, a bribe, begging me to forget everything I had fought to become. Mrs. Langford, I said, my voice perfectly level, without heat or anger. You docked my pay for a speck of dust. You humiliated me in front of your husband. You fired me without a proper severance after I'd worked for you for 2 years and you insulted my home and my family. You told me I was not cut out for this world. And today, you are offering me money to ignore multiple, serious, life-threatening code violations that put your current staff and the structural integrity of this historic property at risk. I paused, lifting the manila folder and placing it gently, precisely on the heirloom table. I can't be bought, Mrs. Langford. Not for a bonus, and certainly not for a debt I've already paid in full. This is no longer personal. I opened the folder. Inside was a stack of legal documents. On the very top was the official stamped notice. I have compiled a comprehensive list of all non-compliant modifications. The cumulative weight of these violations, particularly the unpermitted structural breach, means the house is immediately deemed unsafe for habitation. Under municipal law, the property is subject to immediate condemnation and temporary seizure until all violations are brought into compliance. I looked directly at Mr. Langford, who was slumped, defeated. Effective immediately, the city is issuing a notice of immediate eviction, giving you 72 hours to vacate the premises and secure all personal property. All utilities will be shut off after the deadline. He stammered. This is going to bankrupt us. The compliance fines, the repairs. You can't. Nina, surely there's something you can do? I met her gaze, the gaze that had once made me feel so small. It was calm, steady, and infinitely superior because it was backed by the law, not just wealth. There is, I said, clicking my pen closed for the final time. But it's just business. You taught me that. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the Greystone Mansion foyer. As I walked down the cracked marble steps, the steps I had spent 2 years of my life scrubbing, I felt an emotional release, so profound it almost made me dizzy. It wasn't the rush of anger, but the deep, quiet, triumphant satisfaction of validation. I hadn't needed to shout. I hadn't needed to be dramatic. I just needed to know the rules better than they did. And then I simply followed them. I drove away from Greystone. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Some messes, I thought, clean themselves, given enough time and the right tools. What I learned from this entire experience wasn't just the satisfaction of poetic justice. It was a deeper, more profound truth about power and respect. The Langfords didn't respect me because I was a maid. They wouldn't have respected me if I'd become a wealthy actress. They respect authority. They respect the system that allows them to hold on to their things. And when I stepped into the role of the system's executor, that's when they finally saw me, truly saw me. For the very first time, they saw Nina Hayes, the compliance inspector, not Nina the maid. If you are listening to this, and you are in a situation where you feel disrespected, where you feel powerless, let me tell you this. Stop fighting their battle. Stop trying to argue with their cruelty. Stop trying to prove your worth on their terms. Instead, pivot. Find the thing they take for granted, the system, the law, the knowledge, and master it. Build your competence into a fortress they can't breach. Let your success be quiet, focused, and weaponized with knowledge. Don't seek revenge. Seek irrelevance to their lives and authority in yours. The moment you walk back into their world, not as the victim, but as the architect of the rules, is the moment you win. It took me a decade, but I reclaimed my dignity. I paid my tuition. I built a career. And I slept soundly, knowing that I had done the only thing that truly matters. I had earned justice, and I had upheld the law. I hope my story resonated with you. It was a decade of work for a single, perfect moment. If this tale of justice served gave you chills, if you know what it feels like to finally be seen, then please smash that like button. I want to know your stories. What's the most satisfying moment of validation you've ever experienced? Have you ever walked away from a bad situation and come back with the authority to change the game? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one. And of course, subscribe for more real-life stories about comebacks, justice, and the power of persistence. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and always know the rules better than the people who think they're above them. Thank you for watching.